High Point University presents A Conversation with John Maxwell and Nido Cobain is a production of UNC-TV in association with High Point University.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to High Point University on this very special day when we honor and introduce to you one of the world's most renowned leadership experts. I have been looking for this moment for a long time. This is a man that you're going to hear from this afternoon, a man who has written 74 books. His companies are the world's largest source for leadership training. Some 5 million leaders in 185 countries receive their leadership education through Dr. John Maxwell's companies. This is a person that the New York Times, the Washington Post, Business Week, Wall Street Journal, and so many other periodicals put at the very top of the best-selling lists. We are in for a treat on the campus of High Point University as we welcome a person who joins a whole host of other experts, best-selling authors, United States presidents, executives of large corporations, scientists and artists and faculty from all kinds of institutions who come here to bring to our students and to our family learning that is pragmatic and practical and insightful and useful. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please help me welcome Dr. John Maxwell. Welcome, John. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Well, I have been looking for this opportunity for a long time because, like you, I know this guy, and I know of his work, and I know of the impact he has had on the lives of literally millions of people, perhaps on every continent in this world. So, John, welcome to High Point University.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here with you, my friend.
And I want you to know something. We like you so much that every year here on the campus of High Point University, we publish a daily calendar that people put in their homes, and every day they peel a page and they're inspired by a thought from this calendar. We send it to the parents of our students, we use it here internally with family and staff, and we give it to our friends. We like you so much that we quoted you on January the 2nd. It says, "Life is 10% what happens to me, and 90% of how I react to it." John Maxwell. And if you don't think we like you more, on April the 9th, we quoted you saying, "A man must be good enough to admit his mistakes, smart enough to profit from them, and strong enough to correct them."
Yeah.
And John, I want you to know something. We've already written the quotes from you that we're going to use in the calendar next year. And one of them says, let me read it to you right here by my back notes, "I have never seen a university quite as extraordinary."
Oh, that's good.
And a few others like that. We're so glad you're here.
First of all, this campus is amazing. I mean, I just had the tour. And I love leadership, and as I looked and they talked to me about what has happened here on this campus, my friend, it is obvious that everything rises and falls on leadership, and it's obvious that you are a leader. And I would say to you, Dr. Cobain, and I would talk to all of you out here and say, isn't it wonderful when an institution has great leadership? Makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it? Absolutely.
Now you understand why we invited him. Thank you very much. You're very kind. And any leader who has any sense surrounds himself or herself with a whole host of leaders. And I'm blessed and gifted on this campus to have stellar faculty, outstanding staff, support from our board trustees and our other constituencies. And you're right, it is about leadership. That's how America was founded, with leadership. And that's why you're here today. We want to learn from you. Dr. John Maxwell was born in the state of Michigan He is an ordained minister, and he was the minister at 3 large churches across the country, living in Florida now.
Yes, absolutely.
Living in Florida. And he and I actually have a lot of friends in common, like Zig Ziglar, whom we just lost last year, and Robert Schuller, and Truett Cathy, and others. You know, I've known about your work for such a long time. What is it that really drives you?
Oh, it's very simple. I love to add value to people. And when I started speaking and writing, I just had really one desire, and that is to help people make their lives better. And as a very young leader and person, I began to find some principles that I thought were helping me, and I just decided to try to pass them on. And I have never tired, I'm 67 now, I've never tired of adding value to people, walking into their lives, serving them, loving them, doing everything I possibly can to help them reach their God-given potential. That is the most exciting thing that I can do. You know, it's been said that, you know, our potential is God's gift to us, and what we do with that potential is our gift back to Him. And I just like to help the gift. I just like to help lift that lid and raise it as much as I possibly can. And I just enjoy very much watching people reach their potential. I had a time in my life where my success was really important to me, but I passed that. And now the success of people that I mentor, train, teach, write for, that gives me more joy than any success I've ever had. And that was a great change in my life when I began to say, I'm going to live my life, the rest of my life, just to add value to people. And I'm living the dream. I really am.
And you've done the adding value bit in exemplary ways, and we're all better because of it. Let me quote from some of your work. Law of navigation. Anyone can steer the ship. It takes a leader to chart the course. Are you suggesting that visionary leadership is what makes the world go around? And if so, what is your definition of visionary leadership?
Well, a vision is a picture of tomorrow that creates passion within us today. And so when I say, what is your picture of tomorrow? What do you see for yourself? What do you see for what you're doing? It ought to create a passion within you today. If yesterday was my best day, and if all I can talk about was yesterday, I'm in trouble. Because if we're growing, if we're developing, we appreciate yesterday. We don't devalue it, but we don't go back to it saying, those were my best days. Let me give you an example. I wrote the book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And at the 10th anniversary of that book, our publishers came back to us and said, would you kind of revise it for a 10th anniversary edition? I said, sure. And I hadn't read the book for quite a few years. The first 3 years, I literally traveled around the world lecturing on it. And it's become the best-selling leadership book ever written. And so anyway, I said, sure, I'll go back and revise it. And I went back and I read it, and I was so depressed. I just thought, this isn't very good. And I went into, I'm not a person that goes into a funk, but I went into a funk for a couple days, and I just kept asking myself, what's wrong with this book? And then it hit me. It had been written 10 years earlier. And in 10 years, I had grown. And so when I wrote the book, I was on the same level of it, but in 10 years, I'm still growing. When you're learning and growing and listening and experiencing things like today, I mean, I could hardly wait to get here. I know we're doing Q&A now, but I could hardly wait to get here so I could ask you questions because I've admired you and I've followed you, and I've thought, I've got a whole bunch of questions I want to ask you. And I just learned that if you keep asking questions, you keep learning, you keep growing, and life is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So people ask me all the time, say, John, when are you going to retire? And I don't want to retire. I mean, hello. I mean, well, they'll look at you and say, well, can you? I said, well, yeah, I can. I mean, I'm okay. I've sold 25 million books. I mean, do the math. I mean, hello. I can retire. Trust me, I can retire. But who wants to retire? You know, I mean, I just love what I do. And so, but people keep asking me. So I finally found an answer, and that is, when I die, I'm retiring. Honestly, when I'm dead, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back to be here with you. I'm not going to write any more books. I'm dead. You know what I'm saying? I've retired. But I love my life, and I love helping people, And again, you can see I got it from my father, and it's just amazing.
So I mean, I think we hear you. You're talking about being in a continuum of learning.
Oh, of course.
School is never out for the pro.
Yeah.
You know, you're on a college campus where faculty certainly get that. They consistently and constantly are in professional development, learning, writing, discovering, and we tell our students that life is lived best when you're always learning and growing.
Absolutely.
So here's something you wrote. It's called "The Leader's Greatest Return is Developing People." You said, what does developing people mean? You said, I live life to add value to people.
Absolutely.
What does developing people mean? Developing people means I value them. Developing people means I commit time to them. Developing people means I mentor them. Developing people means I equip them. Developing people means I empower them. Dr. Maxwell, is leadership a mindset? Is it an attitude? Is it a skill? Is it something you're born with it? Is it something you're born with tendencies towards it? Is it something you learn, something you choose? What exactly is it?
Well, first of all, leadership simply defined is influence. It's that simple. Your ability to influence people allows you to have the privilege of leading them. You can't lead anyone that you can't influence. In fact, my favorite leadership proverb is, "He that thinketh he leadeth and hath no one following him is only taking a walk." And by the way, don't we know a lot of people in leadership positions taking walks? You know? There they go. You know. And when you ask me about are leaders born, that's when I do Q&A, that's the number one question, because I do leadership all the time. The people raise their hand, they'll say, "John, are leaders born?" And whenever they ask me that question, I look at them and say, well, of course they are. Think about that question. I've never met an unborn leader, you know. Hey, and don't particularly want to either, you know what I'm saying? Don't have any desire. Well, what they're really asking is, are there people that are born, they've got it? You know, if you got it, you go to the front of the line, you lead. If you don't got it, I guess you go to the back of the line and follow. And obviously, there are some people that are born with what I call leadership leanings, giftedness that will allow them to excel as a leader if they really work and reach their potential. But when you think of leadership being influence, anyone can lead. Anyone can increase their influence. Now, not everybody can increase their influence to the same level. But every person, I mean, a mother who's in a home and has children has influence. There's some leadership already going right there. So everybody is a leader. The question is not, are you a leader? The question is, what kind of a leader are you? And are you developing as a leader? And what I have loved in teaching leadership is that when people begin to understand that it's influence and that they can learn to increase their influence, I began to watch people excel. I began to watch them do leadership things that they would never thought of doing, because they begin to see themselves differently. And you know, as we see ourselves, so we go. I mean, how I see you is basically determined by how I see myself. And the moment that I see myself correctly and beautifully, I begin to see other people in a different light also. So I think leadership is of course, it's an attitude. The determination of a good leader and a bad leader is many times determined by their attitude. Leaders are to motivate people, never to manipulate people. So, I mean, when you manipulate people, you move them for your personal advantage. That's always wrong. But you got to move people, but you move them for mutual advantage. And so the attitude of a leader is essential, because sometimes that's the line that crosses over between motivating people and manipulating them. So how my attitude does determine in so many ways my altitude and what I'm going to do as a leader. And you know, one more thing. Leaders see more than others see, and they see before others see. And when you understand that as a leader, you're going to see a bigger picture than everyone else, and you're going to not only see that bigger picture, but you're also going to see it quicker then now that puts a leader at a very distinct advantage over everyone else. So the question is not, does a leader have an advantage? Of course they do. The question is, how do they use that advantage? Do they use that advantage to add value to people and bring them along? Or do they use that advantage to go before people, take off, and do all the winning? Because they're going to win. They're going to finish. And leaders, every day, have the privilege of starting first. But great leaders don't take that privilege. Great leaders say, I will wait. I will wait till I can gather people around me. Because when leaders cross the finish line, they don't finish first. But when they cross the line, they bring people with them. And that's what makes exceptional leadership. Leaders who are willing to see the picture before and more than others, but at the same sense, have a discipline in their life and a passion and value for people that they'll take them across the line with them, if that makes sense.
Warner Books in the year 2003 published one of your books, and the title of the book was and is, There is No Such Thing as Business Ethics. Really?
There's no such thing as business ethics. There's just ethics. And you either have them or you don't. And if you have them, they work in business. Oh, happy day. And if you don't have them, they're not going to work. I mean, you can't compartmentalize ethics. I mean, it's kind of like, okay, in my business I'll be ethical, and over here in my community I won't. I mean, you can't. I said I can't write a book on business ethics, and that's where the title, There's No Such Thing as Business Ethics, I mean, being a marketer, he said, got the title for the book, got the title for the book, and he was very happy. And then I went away and I said, you got to give me a month to think about it, because I thought in a culture, in a society that has no absolutes, how do you teach ethics? I mean, come on. If everything's moving, there's no baseline, there's no standard, there's no North Star, how can you teach ethics? So I worked on it, and I took my writing team for 2 days to Nashville, and we just wrestled with this issue of how can we do this? And we had a eureka moment. We decided to build the book and base the book on the Golden Rule. Because the Golden Rule is in every religion and every culture in the world. We got our research people on it real quick, and so we said, okay, we'll base it off of the Golden Rule, and we wrote the book, and it received a lot of kind of awards from organizations that really espoused ethical living, but I really enjoyed that book, and when I go into corporate community, they're always asking me a lot about that. In fact, the Wall Street Journal interviewed me the other day, and they asked me about ethics. And, a lot of companies now teach it, which is a wonderful thing. And they said, can you teach ethics? I said, well, of course you can. It's a wonderful thing that they're doing that. But I said, it does no good to teach it if you don't live it. So, step number one is not do we have a class on ethics. Step number one is do we have a teacher that's ethical? Let's start there, and when I go to Beijing University, because they use a lot of my leadership there, and so when I go there to teach and lecture, they're always, these Chinese bright kids in business school, the number one question they ask me are questions on ethics, because they've lived in a culture for so many years that didn't have that. And all of a sudden now they're getting exposed to other countries, and they're having to do deals, and all of a sudden they're realizing there's going to have to be some kind of a standard there. So it was a fun book to write, because I felt that it gave me an opportunity maybe to change a little bit of the soul of America and I think that it did give me that opportunity, but there is no such thing as business ethics.
Well, you touch on a very important point, which we believe in wholeheartedly at High Point University. And the point is that who you spend time with is who you become, what you choose is what you get. Absolutely. And what influences your choices and what influences the opportunities of who you spend time with. It's the zone in which you live. So, Dr. Maxwell, what we've done at High Point University effectively is not simply take students and say, here's an opportunity to major in this discipline or this discipline. But rather we said, this is an opportunity for you to get a holistic education, to prepare yourself for the world, not as it is, not as it was, but as it's going to be. and to create an environment. We tell our parents that we've created an environment in which, through which, by which students choose to be extraordinary. The environment feeds it. Let me just give you an example. Our campus is always clean. Visitors here are baffled by the notion that they don't see people running around cleaning the campus. I said, you have 4,300 students plus another 1,500 employees. How can that be? And we said, if the environment is clean, if you set the standard of excellence at this level, what would students do? They will attempt to reach it. If you set it here, they will attempt to reach that too. If the place is clean, who is going to be the first dingaling to throw a piece of paper on the crowd?
Absolutely.
And I think that's your point.
Oh, no,
your point is that ethics works that way.
Yep, it does.
That if you choose to live in an environment and with people who are that way, it influences the very person that you become.
And they're caught more than taught. And that's so true, because people, when they see it, people do what people see. And 89% of what Stanford research says, 89% of what we know, we learn visually. And so when you look at a campus like this that is beautiful and it's clean, and you can visually see excellence across your campus, what are the students going to do? They're going to go right to that level. Again, that visualization, that environment creates the behavior, no doubt about it.
In the year 2000, Thomas Nelson published a book by you called Failing Forward. What's that all about?
Listen, how many of you have failed at least one time? Let's raise your hand. Okay. Today. And my publisher didn't want me to write the book because they said nobody will buy a book on failure. I mean, they said they just won't. And I said, well, they'll buy this book because I'm going to talk about failing forward. And in the 10 years since I've written the book, or the whole deal, I've had so many more failures. So that, I see it here. The book, Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn, is my second failure book. But it's on a graduate level. I've learned how to fail much better, you know what I mean, at a much higher level. But I was in Brazil doing a major conference and signing books, and a kid brought up a Failing Forward book and handed it to me. And he said, the book saved my life. And I said, thank you very much. I'm glad. And I handed it back to him. And when I looked at him, his tears were streaming down his face. And I stopped for a moment and I said, saved your life? He said, yeah. He said, it literally saved my life. He said, I was going to commit suicide. He said, I picked up that book. And he said, my life was so full of failure. He said, you gave me such hope. And of course, you know as well as I do, you're an author. That's why you write. You write you never know where that book's going to go. You don't know what person's going to pick up that book, and it's just going to be the message that they need to hear at that time in their life. And I've just been so pleased with the two failure books. They just, there's something that people identify. If I was going to talk about my success, I need a day, but if I'm going to talk about my failure, I need a week. And I think, I think if you're successful, you create what I call a success gap. And that basically, if a person's just successful, if you're a successful life, you don't even do it on purpose, but you get a gap. I mean, you're here, and average people are here, and I mean, you've seen more places, you've had more opportunities, you've got more money. And so this gap happens. I don't think we try to create it, but it happens. And I, very early in my life, said, I'm going to do everything I can to close that gap. Because I don't want to be anybody's star. I don't want to have fans. You see, if you want to be a star and you want to have fans, you create the gap. In fact, you try to widen that gap. You want to be here and you want everybody to go, oh, ah, and amazing what they can do. And I said, you know what, I don't want to have fans, I want to have friends. And if I'm going to have friends, I'm going to walk slowly through the crowd. I'm going to do everything I possibly can. And I think one of the ways, not the only way, but I think one of the ways to close that gap is to talk very candidly about the things that I've done that haven't worked out, or my failures, or just my humanness. And as soon as I start talking about that, people just you can just sense them come around and say, I got you. You know what I mean? I understand you, because you don't help people if you have a gap. They look at it and they say, I can't achieve that. I can't get there. They're too big. They're too fast. They're too wonderful, whatever that is. But when you close that gap and you walk slowly through the crowd, then people begin to say, wait a minute. I can get there. And if you're successful, your desire more than anything else should be to come and close that gap until other people can come around and say, I can get there too. And I think that's what you're doing with the university. I think what you're doing is you're creating an environment of success and excellence and vision and potential. But I think you're bringing that right down to where those kids are. And I think they're able to live in this environment, and they're able to see living visual examples of teachers and staff that are doing this. And I think that's where the change occurs. The change occurs not through the difference. The change occurs when all of a sudden I look at somebody and I say, wow, I think I could do that too. And there's not a greater compliment than a leader can have than to have people look at that leader and say, me too, I can do that too. And the moment that happens, and so when I wrote the Failing Forward book, I just said, I'm going to close this gap and let everybody understand the only difference between you and me is I failed more than you have. But it's that attitude of coming back after that failure that really makes all the difference.
You know, in this very theater at High Point, I teach a freshman class.
Yeah.
And we have about 650 freshmen per section, so it fills up all 3 levels. You know, we say that young people have limited focus, limited ability to listen. It's not true. Young people are just like airplanes. We only hear about the ones that crash. We don't hear about all the ones who get up in the morning and do amazing things, like our students investing 110,000 hours a year in service, for example, service learning. But they sit in this class as freshmen, and then I teach a senior class. And the message that permeates this class is the notion that I can, that the last 4 letters in the word American are the letters I can. That the word impossible doesn't really exist because you put an apostrophe after the I, it becomes I am possible. Mm-hmm. That potential exists and resides in all of us. That's why we say on this campus that our number 1 purpose is to plant seeds of greatness. Yeah. Not only in their minds, we are an education institution, of course in their minds, but also in their souls.
Absolutely.
And in their hearts. And that's what mentorship is all about, and that's what you've done. And I want to read how you came about starting one of the most influential, to use your word influence, leadership is about influence, how you came about starting Equip.
Oh, yeah.
That you were, in fact, I'm reading from 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. You were, in fact, in South America, and you were giving a speech. And you said everything started well. The people were very gracious, and I was able to connect with them despite the language and cultural barriers. But it wasn't long before I could tell that the attendees and I were not on the same page. When I started to teach about leadership, I could tell my comments were not connecting with them. They didn't engage, and what I was trying to communicate didn't seem to make an impact. And I'll skip a little bit. This wasn't the first time I had experienced such frustration. I noticed that whenever I traveled to developing countries, I faced similar situations. I suspect that in nations where there is no strong business infrastructure and where government doesn't allow the citizens much freedom, it is difficult for leaders to develop. I'll skip again. After listening patiently, my wife Margaret replied, maybe you're the one who's supposed to do something about this. And then you went on to talk about how you began a new organization called Equip. Tell us what that stands for, Equip, and what does it do, and what did it do?
Well, it stands for encouraging qualities undeveloped in people. And when Margaret, I was so discouraged after an international trip, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. It's just hard. And besides, I love humor, and you know, you've done international stuff. So much doesn't cross over and transcend. And so I just said, I'm going to stay in the States and do my stuff here. And when she said it, maybe I should do something about this, it just pierced my heart. And I spent a couple of months just wrestling with this issue of doing something about it. And then I made a decision. My brother, who's 2 years older than I am, very successful in business, he and I had a long conversation, and we said, let's start a leadership organization to train in especially in developing countries. And that's how it started. It started with a little thought, little prayer. Little did I realize that was 16 years ago that we would become the largest leadership training organization in the world. And we're just a few months away from being in every country in the world. And it's been so amazing. It's been so satisfying. But it hasn't been easy. Because when you go internationally, people think leadership is position and title and authority. And I can remember I spoke when the Soviet Union fell. It was going to fall, but 2 weeks before it was official, they invited me to the Kremlin, and I spoke to, I was the first non-communist to go in, and they asked me to come in and speak on leadership and future and vision to 5,000 people. And I remember as I looked at their faces, they had no hope. And I realized that they were in an environment, in a culture that they didn't even have a good picture, a healthy picture of what leadership was. And so we took it on as a challenge, and today it's the most rewarding part of my life. We're in Guatemala now. We're now into what we believe we're going into the 7 streams of influence in countries, and starting with the top, with the presidents of the countries, the business leaders of the country, the top educators, the cabinets, the Supreme Courts, and we're going to the top, and we're teaching leadership values. And this is incredible. This is amazing. We started in Guatemala last June. I have a coaching company. I flew 150 of my coaches in. And in a week, they trained 19,000 leaders in teaching roundtables with values. And those 19,000 leaders all started training, and now 150,000 people are going through values-based leadership training. And what I learned is this, going back to ethics and values, something I know you hold very dear, that when you teach leadership values, when people learn leadership values and start to live those values out, there is an automatic lift in their life. I mean, you don't have to go in and pump them up. You don't have to go motivate them. They lift themselves because they see, think, and behave differently. And we're seeing that now in Guatemala, and countries in Latin America are saying, okay, we want to be next. And so I just close with saying that, boy, I'm glad Margaret looked at me and said, you ought to do something about it. Because I think if she wouldn't have said that, I think I would have settled for second best, which reminds me again that isn't it true in all of our lives, people come into our lives and God uses them to speak truth into us. And so many times from them and from what they say or what they've done, it's changed me. And today, Equip is an amazing organization. But it began out of that conversation on the plane with Margaret. And she always lets me know that what I am today, it's because of her. And it's so sickening because she's right. Oh, I hate that.
So a part of an effective leader's job, responsibility, calling is to mentor, to coach.
Yes.
To be a hero, a model, a mentor.
Yep, absolutely.
So on a university campus, of course, here we have programs in leaderships, in human relations and other areas. And we have freshman advisors. I think we have some of our students here today, and freshman advisors here, yes. And so when a freshman comes to this institution, they are assigned an advisor, a coach, who helps them chart their course through the 4 years of this institution. And at some point, they then transfer to a leader who helps them with internships and career services to prepare them for life. One of the things that I've struggled with, and you wrote about, you said the fallacy of leadership, and I think lots of leaders struggle with this. The fallacy of leadership is thinking that if you can lead in one area, you can lead in all areas.
Yeah.
So how does one recognize and acknowledge that, and what does one do about it?
Well, I believe that to be very true. I think leadership is influence, but for example, if would I have to lead in the area of technology, I wouldn't be the leader. It's not an area that I'm any good at. I have no skills in that area, have very little knowledge. And that's why I say great leaders, they lead in their strengths, but they don't lead in their weaknesses. And they follow in their weaknesses, and they lead in their strengths. And what that means is that there are days when I lead, and there are days when I follow. In fact, I'm not sure I would follow a leader that isn't following somebody. I'm not sure that I want to follow a leader who believes that he or she has all the answers and always knows the path. Because I think we can do a tremendous disservice to people when we try to, fake it till we make it. Try to somehow act as if we have answers. And the more that I've done leadership, and the older here's what I've discovered. When I was young, I was certain about everything. I was just good. I mean, I just knew. I remember as a pastor, before we had children, I did some of the most incredible messages on parenting. I mean, I was good. I mean, I was really good. And then I got humbled. It's called kids. Now I'm a grandparent. Grandparents, hello. I mean, grandchildren are God's reward for you, not killing your children. In fact, I'm going to get off this for a moment. When I'm a grandparent, so I can't. How many grandparents are here? Then you understand, don't you? And the rest of you don't have a clue. But when you have that first grandbaby, you just know that's the smartest, most beautiful baby ever born. I mean, and nobody has to tell you. You just know. And then you ask yourself, you hold this grandchild and you ask yourself a question: why did intelligence skip a generation? It's just. I was at a conference. I was at a large convention, and I just was playing with the people, and I did that. I said that, and then all of a sudden I realized my son Joel was in the audience. And so when I went back to the green room, he was back there. He was waiting for me. And I said, "Oh, Joel, honey," I said, when I was talking about intelligence skipping a generation, I was kidding. I was just having fun. And he looked at me and said, "No, it's okay, Dad." He said, "It's okay." In fact, he said, "I think you're right." And I said, "You do?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I think you're right." He said, in fact, he said, "Just last week, Grandpa and I had that very same discussion." Here we go. But outside of being a grandparent where you have all the answers and all the wisdom for your grandchildren, I believe that leaders do it. I think people don't want perfect leaders, but they do want authentic leaders. And I think there is great trust that is engendered when a leader looks at the people and has honest moments with them and said, "I haven't been here myself." And I think I should give the leadership baton to someone else here. I would like them to lead me. And when I wrote the 21 Laws of Leadership, it became very evident. I wrote the book that you can't be good in each one of those laws. You just can't. And yet they are leadership laws. And in fact, I wrote the book, and there are 5 of them that I'm average or less than average. Now, that's disgusting. In fact, I kept trying to look at those 5 and say they can't be laws because I'm not any good at them. You know what I mean? So what does that mean? That means that on the law of navigation, when you read that one, that it takes a leader to chart the course. I'm a big picture person. I'm not as good as a charting the course person. But I have people around me that do that. And so that I don't lead every day. A lot of times my team leads, and I follow, and I gladly follow. And I think that when we come to grips with who we are and what we can do, but also what we can't do, and begin to acknowledge that there are people that can complement us. I want my team not to compete with me. I want them to complete me. And I find that statement on leaders, that once you recognize that you can't lead in every area, you shouldn't lead in every area, then you become a willing follower. And some of my best moments really have been when I followed somebody. I value those moments. I value the following as much as I value the leading. And I think that if you don't value both, I think you're an incomplete leader.
Let me ask you a series of questions and give me short answers.
Okay.
Can you give me short answers?
No. The only time was just then when I said okay. That's it. Shortness is over. You know what I'm saying? I've done my best.
The role of faith in leadership versus the role of courage in leadership.
Well, to me, they connect. My faith gives me courage. My faith allows me to believe further, deeper than what I think people that lack faith believe. So it's not either or to me. My faith gives me the courage to lead.
So here I say that High Point University transformed itself in the last 9 years because we collectively have faithful courage.
Yeah,
I think we're saying the same thing.
We are.
I said it a little better than you said
Yeah,
it, but it's the
much
same
better.
thing.
In fact, in fact, in my next book, I'll quote you. In fact,
Next calendar.
next calendar. But I'll not only quote you in the next book, I'll give you credit. I'll put it. Now I won't give you royalties, but I will give you credit.
Okay. The role of entrepreneurial spirit in leadership. Is the entrepreneurial spirit a cornerstone for being an effective and productive leader?
Let me say this. I've known entrepreneurs that I did not think were great leaders. So they're just creative, and they are driven, and they are good at doing something, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily good at leading something. But all leaders that are great have an entrepreneurial spirit. So there's a difference. And what I mean by that is when they have this vision, the more they walk toward that vision, the more entrepreneurial they become. Because the walk is the discovery of the vision. When you start, you don't see the whole picture. And as you move, the picture begins to be much more clearly. And that's where the creativity of a leader and the entrepreneurship of a leader comes into that vision. So what I always tell is leaders is very simple. You start off with a vision, but it's not the same as you start walking. You become entrepreneurial, and you begin to see opportunity, and you begin to see open doors, and you begin to walk in it that way.
So here's a statistic that's pretty astonishing. Recent research suggests that college graduates, today's college graduates, will change jobs between 40 and 50 times in their lifetime.
That's staggering.
They don't change jobs because they're lazy and get fired. They don't change jobs because they necessarily just get bored. They change jobs because the jobs become irrelevant, because technology may take over the jobs, because we'll find new innovative ways to do what the human hand could do faster, better, and more efficiently. So if that is true, then we in higher education ought to be focusing diligently and thoughtfully on instilling this entrepreneurial spirit in every one of our students. Because how do you change that many jobs if you're not innovative, if you don't have an entrepreneurial spirit, if you're not flexible and nimble?
No question. And the whole fact is, I would look at my life, there are probably 6 times I've reinvented myself. And not changed my values, but I've reinvented myself to fit the time and what the needs were, and have been able to slide right over there and just continue to build on my life. So I agree with that completely.
You know, John, one thing we do on this campus to create that zone that you're talking about, mentorship, leadership, a continuum of learning, is if you walk across this campus, you see sculptures.
Oh, beautiful.
They're not sculptures of, just whimsical matter. They're sculptures of men and women, the great thought leaders of all of history. If you walk outside this theater, you hear classical music. At first, people thought horizontally and said, what's that all about? This isn't exactly, just a concert hall. It's a campus. And we said no student should graduate from college having not been exposed to the finest arts of all of history: dance, poetry, literature, and music, because they influence the person in a very meaningful way. It's the whole argument today about liberal arts. Liberal arts, is that really important? Parents are saying it costs so much to go to college, therefore I want my child to graduate with a skill where he or she can immediately get a job. We argue that's important, of course, But of equal importance is developing and evolving the whole person.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what liberal arts do for a person. So here we create these environments to ensure that students understand they're no longer competing on a continental stage. They are competing on a global stage. It's going to be tougher and more demanding. In fact, in your book that you referred to a moment ago, Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Lose, and over the word lose is the word learn. You say, I define teachability as possessing the intentional attitude and behavior to keep learning and growing throughout life. That's what we try to do on this campus. That's what you've preached for years. We agree with you on that. You also say, everyone has something to teach me, speaking of yourself. Yes. Every day I have something to learn. Every time I learn something, I benefit. How does one create in the human soul the desire to learn? Especially in the midst of a cluttered world where the infusion of data comes at us through technology, through media, through an abundance of informational sources, some in print and some otherwise.
When I was starting off in my ministry, I really had a passion to build a great church, but I didn't know how to. Now, I was a theologue. I graduated with a theology degree, and I understood theology, but I didn't know how to build a great church. Right? The good news is I could explain God to somebody. The bad news is I didn't have anybody to explain God to. Because I didn't have any leadership courses. I didn't have any courses that would help me know how to build a congregation. And so I remember seeing the list of the 10 largest churches in America. And I took down those names of the pastors and the churches. And over a 3-month period, I would call them on the phone. And I'd say, you don't know me, I just have a little country church. But I would like to build a great church. But I don't know how. And I know you're very busy, and so I'll give, if you give me 30 minutes of your time, I'll come to where you are, and I'll give you $100 for 30 minutes of your time. And $100 was a lot of money to me because I was making $4,200 a year in my first I was a little country church. And 8 of those requests were denied, but 2 of them, two said yes. So I'll never forget, going to their places and going into the office, and I had back then, 1970, 71, a big old tape recorder, and got it on my briefcase, and I pushed it, and I had 5 pages, legal pages of questions already because I only had 30 minutes, and I really had to get with it. And so, I sat down immediately and pushed that tape recorder, and I only probably got through my first page halfway down, and my time was up, and I, clicked off the recorder, stuck everything in my briefcase, got up, reached in a $100 check, and handed it to them, shook their hands down. I want to thank you very much for adding value to me. And in both of those situations, they smiled, and they gave me the $100 check right back. So I don't want your money. You're a young kid full of passion. You really want to learn. And in both of those cases, it had been a late morning appointment. They both times, and neither pastor knew I was talking to them, they asked me to go to lunch. And I'm sitting down for lunch with my hero, and I don't know, when you're with your hero, I'm just enamored that I'm with him. So the food, when you eat with your hero, it doesn't go down. You know what I'm saying? It just goes about here, and so I just shuffled food around. And when I finished, we went back to their office, and in both cases, those men prayed for me. And I walked out, and I went into, I can still remember going back into my car, throwing my briefcase in the back seat, closing the door, and laying my head on the steering wheel and bawling like a baby. And I said, God, if you can do that for them, you can do that for me. And I started my career off by asking questions. And everything I know is because of a question I ask. And I know I'm known for leadership, and leaders are known for answers, but I can tell you, I don't major in answers. I major in questions. And to this day, I still ask questions. I just wrote a book that will come out in October entitled Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And the whole book is about questions. And what I learned as a very young leader is that if I ask good questions and if I'm in proximity to great people, and I was very fortunate, my father, my dad, when we got into the 7th grade, he set us down and he paid us to read books. Now we didn't get paid to do chores. In fact, I wanted to because all my friends got paid to do chores. So I went to my dad when I was a kid and said, "All my friends get paid to do chores, Dad. Sounds like a good idea. To me, what do you think?" And he said, "It's a terrible idea. I won't pay you to do chores." He said, "You do chores because you're part of the family, and I don't pay you to be part of the family." In fact, he said, "Let me explain it this way. By the time you were born, you owed your mother for 9 months of room and board." So shut up and take out the garbage. You know what I mean? And why would I pay you to take out the garbage unless I want to be you to grow up to be a garbage man? I put my money where my values are. So my brother is 2 years and 3 months older. My sister's 7 years younger. And all three of us, when we got to 7th grade, we were required to read 30 minutes a day, and he paid us, whatever he paid for the book is what he paid us to read that book. And then our dinner conversations was around what we were reading. Changed my life. By the time I graduated from high school, I was so far ahead of my peers. Not because, in fact, many of them were smarter than I, but I was so far ahead of them because I was reading books on success. And if I started, How to Win Friends, Influence People, The Power of Positive Thinking, Think and Grow Rich. Hello. The books that all of you know, the books that you know, the books that you and I. In fact, I was going to Latin America a few years ago on a plane, and I got Success Magazine out and said, here are the top 25 books on success to read in your lifetime. And so I read the article. It was a good article. And then I went back and counted it. I had read 19 of those 25 books by the time I graduated from high school. And the only reason I hadn't read the other 6 is they hadn't been written yet. When I was in the 9th grade, my father took me to meet Norman Vincent Peale, who was a mentor of his. And when I was a sophomore, he took me to meet E. Stanley Jones. And here's why I'm saying all this. Again, when I came on your campus, and I also saw on the bench these figures of great people. And I'm reminded of going when I was in Guatemala, and we were doing our research before we went into that country. And one of the questions I asked these leaders, the top people, is who are your heroes in Guatemala? And they had none. No heroes. And I thought, no wonder the country's in trouble. And then I thought, as I went by and saw these bronze, I said, look what you're doing. You are visually, again, putting in front of these kids men and women who they can look to and study and look up to. And it changed my life. And between the 7th and high school and reading the books, and then starting off my career and going to those 2 pastors. By the way, those 2 pastors, I asked them to do something for me. I said, do you know any of these other 8? And they knew. And I said, would you call them? And would you tell them you met me? And I'm on fire. And one of the questions I always ask when I do learning lunches, I've done learning lunches since 1972. Every month I do a learning lunch. I would take a person out, I buy the lunch, I don't even eat lunch, and all I do is ask questions. They're quicker, smarter, faster, better than I am in something. And so I'm going. And one of the questions I always ask them is, who do you know that I should know? That has led me to more people to meet and to know, and it's opened up some of the most wonderful, incredible relationships in my life. So when you talk about learning and the appetite to grow in that whole process, I understand it, and I know the value of questions. I am today because of the questions I've asked, not by the answers I've given. And I learned a long time ago that when I'm talking, I'm not learning anything. But when I'm asking questions and when I'm listening, that's when the learning begins. And I just have a huge appetite to keep asking questions and keep learning.
And that's the value of universities.
That's
a university that focuses on the student is a university that establishes zone,
absolutely,
an environment for asking questions and discovering answers. By the way, Norman Vincent Peale, you just said. Norman Vincent Peale, who passed away some years ago, when he was 96, he accepted my invitation to come and speak here in the city of High Point. And when I wrote my first book in 1983, he hadn't heard of me, didn't know me from Adam. I asked him to write the introduction to my book, and he did. And he did.
That's amazing.
And I didn't appreciate fully
Yeah.
the value of what he was, the gift he was giving me.
Sure.
Until later in life, I realized what a risk he took.
Sure. A
And
young
what an
kid.
investment he made.
Yeah.
And that's what you've done throughout your career. And that's why Indiana Wesleyan University has the Maxwell Center for Business and Leadership. And that's why you have been such a hero, model, and mentor to so many. Now, Dr. John Maxwell, I got to say something to you. We are better today because we invested this time with you. And we are better today because we are reminded of the many writings that you have made. What makes you so special is that you're a down-to-earth, humble leader who's grateful to God for all the goodness that's come your way. And you have understood thoughtfully and fully that to whom much is given, much is required. Yeah. And you've reached beyond yourself and beyond your needs to feed the needs of others and to answer their prayers for good things that would come across their path. I'm a better person because I've spent this time with you, and this university will proudly put your picture along the hall of some 30 or 40 of some of the world's most famous people have come here, United States presidents and others, to speak to our students, and we will do it with pride and with joy because you are a man of influence. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
High Point University presents A Conversation with John Maxwell and Nido Cobain is a production of UNC TV in association with High Point University.